Now for our second panel, representation of women in sports. The moderator will be Beth Daniels, UCCS professor. Dr. Jen Welter, first female football coach in the NFL. Raha Maharik, first Saudi woman to summit Mount Everest. Elizabeth Marks, combat medic, WCAP, two-time Paralympic medalist, and Invictus Games gold medalist. And Shannon Galpin, founder of Afghan Cycles and National Geographic Adventurer of the Year.
Hello, everyone. Our panel today is about women in sports, and my name is Beth Daniels. I'm an associate professor here at UCCS, and my research actually focuses on how media images of female athletes impact adolescent girls' body perceptions. That's why I'm on this panel, but you're really here to hear from these amazing athletes and activists in the women's sports world. So I'm just going to hand off to Jen Welter to get us started with introducing yourself and telling us about your journey.
I like what she did there. She said it's a handoff. Now we're in my world. Welcome to football.
That was totally intentional.
It was. I got it. I like what you're putting down. I'll pick it up even though I was a linebacker, and if you tried to give me a handoff, I'd pick it and run back for a touchdown. So, you know, I always like to say that most people see what happened with somebody when the lights came on, right? But the greatest of people started long before they were in those bright spotlights. And for me personally, I started as a tennis player. I thought I was going to change the world through tennis. And I think that's something really powerful for girls, because back then I look at it now and I say, you know why I loved tennis? Because it was the place in this world that I could see women on TV playing sports. And I think that they were everything that I still believe a woman should be, right? They were beautiful and powerful and strong and good. And I wanted to be one of them. And though I went on to play professional football, and I was really good in tennis, my highest ranking was 50 in Florida, which means I was really good. I had a coach who told me at 5'2", probably, well, that was my top height. So back then it was 4 foot something, and a string bean soaking wet, that because of my height and my build, I would never be strong enough to play pro tennis. I didn't quit that day. I didn't throw my racket down. But what it did is just kind of took that love that I had and that belief that I could do anything, and it changed it. So the girl who would fight to be on the tennis court for hours and hours every day just kind of started to find other things to do. Sometimes I wish I could go back and see that tennis coach now and be like, you know what, you were right. I'd never be strong enough to play pro tennis. I played pro football instead. But for any of you that have big dreams, and you know, I see some awesome young athletes, I'm sure, in the audience right now, I'm talking directly to you guys when I say this. Don't ever let anybody put a ceiling on your dreams. Because those people who tell you what's not possible, they're speaking through the scar tissue of their life. And something hurt them somewhere along the way. And they wanted something that they didn't get. But just because they didn't get something that they wanted doesn't mean that you can't get what you want. Thankfully, that tennis coach also made me believe that I never wanted anybody to tell me I'd never be strong enough again. And if you can see that, I think I did a pretty good job in that capacity. But I started lifting weights as a girl before it was cool to lift weights as a girl. And I became a really good athlete. I played everything. Didn't really realize that there was no great roadmap from a small town to big time sports, even though I had this belief that I could be a professional. I didn't know any better. So I guess I just worked hard because I wanted to get there no matter what it took. Played college rugby. I mean, I fell in love when I saw this sport. Growing up in a small town where football was a way of life and they wouldn't let girls play, woo, I said, this is soccer meets football and I'm doing this. Played all 4 years, got recruited to the under-23 national team, at which time, again, though I was the best that they had, they told me I was too small. And though they could, they had people who were scared of me, they couldn't double my size no matter what. So, again, I got rejected. Then I found football. I was playing flag football on weekends. And full disclosure, I was never really good about pulling flags. I still kind of believed I wanted to tackle. And I still did. So when the league called and asked if they had anybody who they thought could play tackle, they gave them one name, and that was mine. And I finally found my destiny. And I made myself a really small, very big promise that day. And that was that I would step up to every challenge that the game put in my way. So if I had a secret to my success that led me to then become an 8-time Pro Bowler, a 4-time gold medalist, or a 4-time Super Bowl winner, and a 2-time gold medalist, and then to make pro football history in men's pro football 3 times, it would be this. No matter what those challenges are in your life, step to them, grab at them, and go for them 100%.
So this is quite difficult being between these two amazing women, but I'll try my best. My name is Raham Harreg. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I was born in Jeddah. And when I was growing up, I always felt like I was different, and I always acted very different, which is, you would think that isn't a big deal here, but back home, not being within the rules and guidelines of my culture and our social mentalities wasn't easy growing up. And the older I got, the more I realized that me being a woman will not help me as well as I thought, because most of the things I loved were not fit for females. I loved sports, I loved being outdoorsy, I wanted to run with my brother and his friends as opposed to being indoors with my sister and my mom. And for a long time I tried to fit within that cultural box that everyone expected me to fit. I really, really tried to fit in. Well, not really, but to my poor parents' minds, I tried to calm them and fit into that culture and like the things that the girl liked. And I couldn't, because I believed that I was destined for more. I believed that who I am is not dictated by my nationality, my religion, my gender, or where I was born. That's just ridiculous things to set standards of a human being. So I tried to have a quiet life. I graduated from university, and then I worked in a very good advertising agency. And then my life changed when I hit a specific age that every single woman reaches in their life. Now, this age is different from culture to culture, from backgrounds, from, maybe in here it's a little bit later, but where I'm from, it's usually early 20s. You should be, in the path to finding that nice guy and, Prince Charming and all that, which would be fantastic. I'd love to find Prince Charming, but not in my mom's living room when his mom is sitting there and waiting for me to walk in. I'd love to meet him somewhere else. So I hit that age. And I realized that I can no longer pretend to be someone I'm not, which is this meek person who wants to just wait for this guy to come and sweep me off my feet. And I had a great job, and my parents were pretty much adamant that I had to go back to Saudi Arabia because I was living in the UAE, I was living in Dubai, and I had a great job. And they told me, it's time for you to come now and settle down. And that was it. That was the spark. That was the moment where I realized either I stand now or I'll fall and I'll never be able to get up to be the woman I wanted to be. So I reached these crossroads in my life. On one hand, the going after this crazy thing that I knew existed. I knew I was destined for more. I think every single woman on this panel will tell you that you knew that you had so much more to give than what people expected you. And on the other hand, I had the more traditional lifestyle of going from wedding to wedding, waiting for Prince Charming to come and sweep me off my feet and ride across the sunset. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that might be the perfect life for most people. It's also what I want at some point, but at the time, it turns out I wasn't destined to walk a path at all. I was destined to climb one. So I speak really fast when I'm excited. And this moment, I realized that I needed to do something new. I needed to do my own version of a rebellion. And I almost gave up. I really looked hard online. I asked people, what are you doing? What are your plans? What are your hobbies? I really tried to find this answer to this thing. And I almost gave up. I almost went to my mom and told her, okay, find me some Abdullah Ahmed or Muhammad, some nice guy with a nice house. And I almost gave up. But that little thing in my heart couldn't shut up. And I love that little voice, and I'll always listen to her. And one day I was rewarded. I was sitting with a group of people, and she said, a girl that I didn't know well, she randomly said she's climbing Kilimanjaro, which I, honest to God, thought it was a fruit. I said, you're climbing what? She said, I'm climbing Kilimanjaro, which is the highest peak in Africa. And that was the moment that opened this whole new world for me. I realized that there's mountain climbing. There are these things that people travel and go climb mountains, and I decided to climb it. And the more I told people that I was going to climb Kilimanjaro, the more they told me I couldn't, and the more I wanted to. And I finally decided to climb it, so I called my father and I told him, because I still had to have permission from him. I'm still an Arab woman from an Arab country. So I called my dad and I told him that I wanted to climb this mountain, and he flat out just said no. He didn't even leave any room. To make a long story short, I convinced him that this would be my last hurrah before I go back and find this. This is my power of diplomacy. So I convinced him that, Dad, since I'm leaving my job and I have time off anyways, so he said yes. And this poor man did not know what that yes would be. After I climbed Kilimanjaro, I can't explain how I felt when I stood on that mountain. I went from thinking a 4-star hotel was camping to camping in the highest peak in Africa. That was the complete drastic leap I took. And I was cold, I was tired, I was blue everywhere. And all I could think about was, you're gonna fail, you're a Saudi woman, you can't do this, you are less, all I could think about is this. But when I got to that mountain, cold, tired, hungry, blue, I looked like a cat that was left out in the cold, exhausted, but I've never felt so alive. I never felt the sense of accomplishment, the sense of grandness that I thought I'd never feel. And I knew that would not be the last time I climbed that mountain. And surely enough, I climbed Kilimanjaro, came back down, and my parents knew that they created a monster. I came back down, I climbed every single mountain I could climb that was near the region. I started climbing bigger mountains and more. My poor parents just lost track of the mountains I started to do, and just when I thought I had reached that limit of my bravery and me breaking the mold, I saw a little mountain called Everest one day with my own eyes. I looked up in Everest Base Camp and I saw that mountain, and that was it. And my mom jokes, she always says that, I wish one day Raha look at a man same way she looked at that mountain. She was in love. And she's right. I fell in love with the idea of climbing that mountain because I fell in love with the idea of me standing on top of the world. A Saudi woman born in the desert, standing on top of the world. I love that idea. And surely enough, a year and lots of arguments and lots of drama with culture, family. She will never get married. She will be ousted from society and all that. This Saudi-born girl took her final steps, and I managed to climb the highest mountain in the world. Just to prove, just to prove to myself and every single one of you sitting here that we are capable of so much more than we think. And just to make sure that I was right, that I am capable of doing whatever I wanted, and my gender and all those things that people were weighing me down on will not stop me, I climbed the 7 summits, so I climbed the highest peak in each continent, just to make sure that no one says that that's a one-time thing. And yeah, I want you to just walk away with that, remembering that it doesn't matter. You're all capable of greatness. Thank you.
No pressure, right? That's fine. No. My name is Staff Sergeant Elizabeth Marks, and I'm a Paralympic swimmer and a combat medic in the U.S. Army. I didn't grow up knowing that I wanted to be an athlete. I didn't have really any time for athletics. I grew up as what's called at-risk youth. I joined the Army at 17, deployed at 18, fell in love with being a combat medic. It was a male-dominated field, but it was where I belonged. It's what my heart called for. I'd put everything that I had into it. And then in April of 2010, I was injured in Iraq. I was 19 years old, and I had no idea what was going to happen. I knew for the first time I felt like I had purpose, and I had structure, and I had a path that meant something to me for the first time ever, and now it was in jeopardy. And so during my recovery, I was very concerned that I was going to be found unfit because I couldn't do cardio. I had bilateral hip surgeries, and so I found the pool. And while I was at the pool, a woman saw me and took pity on me trying to swim and taught me how to do it the right way. So I was injured in April of 2010, and in January of 2012 is when I learned how to swim properly. 6 months later, I was simultaneously found fit for duty to stay a combat medic in the U.S. Army, as well as welcomed in the World Class Athlete Program as their first ever Paralympic swimmer. My life has been a series of happy accidents. Every obstacle that I've had has led me to something greater and more powerful. And I think that sometimes we have to push a little bit harder to appreciate the things that we have, and I was afforded that opportunity for sure. When I first started getting in the swing of swimming and competing internationally, I had no idea what I was doing. And a lot of times I competed against other military's men. Well, in 2014, I flew over for a competition called the Invictus Games, and I went into respiratory distress. I had a bilateral pulmonary embolism, and within 24 hours, I was admitted to the hospital and in a coma. I went on to a form of life support called ECMO, and the doctors in the UK saved my life. I was on ECMO for 10 days at 100% and in a coma for a month and a half. When I woke up, my first sergeant leaned over and he's like, "Sergeant Marks, how are you doing?" I said, "First Sergeant, I'm so concerned. What month is it?" He said, "Well, it's October. Why?" So I have a competition in December. So he told me to calm down and lay down and reprioritize my thinking. But I did go to that competition, and I got an American record at it, so. After getting 2 do-overs, I got a do-over in my military career after Iraq, and I got a do-over in swimming after coming out of my coma. It just became more and more precious to me. It just made me want to fight harder and push harder. I've had the fortune of competing in multiple sports against other military's males in SISM Games, which is a military competition that's international. I have had varying experiences with that. A lot of times people are supportive or not. It's kind of one or the other. I have 6 gold medals from international competitions against men. Out of all of those medals, thanks. Out of all of those medals, there was only one time that I got to stand on the podium. I got to stand on the podium once because at all of the other competitions, my own country voted against me getting to podium. That hurt, but it lit a fire once again and made me appreciate my opportunity to make sure that another one of my soldiers didn't have to feel what it felt like to have their family take them off the podium. Fast forward to now, I've had a wonderful career in sports, and very little of it has to do with any medals or accolades. It's been the people and the opportunity to mentor and become a part of this beautiful, strong family that these women are a part of, and hopefully you will be too. I have a gold and a bronze from Rio. I was awarded the Pat Tillman Award at the ESPYs in 2016. I have 6 international medals against men, but I would trade all of it if another little girl got the opportunity that I've got.
I'm kind of the anomaly, I think, in that, well, I grew up wanting to be a dancer. I thought I was going to be a modern dancer, and I graduated high school a year early so that I could leave North Dakota and join a modern dance troupe in Minneapolis, the big, shiny city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, which, coming from North Dakota, is huge. And within about 6 months of living there and feeling so adult and following my dreams, I was raped and nearly killed. And in that moment, never danced again, essentially. I swore that I would never dance again. I never did, on any stage, and really in any form. It changed me dramatically. I survived, obviously. But throughout my recovery, I decided that I wanted to rehab dancers, and I started studying sports therapy at the time. This is almost 20 years ago. There was something called Pilates, which nobody knew what that was, only dancers. It was the secret. And so I wanted to integrate Pilates as an injury prevention and use it outside of the world of dance. But my dream was to work with dancers. Short story is that I moved to Europe. I wanted to study with physiotherapists there. I stayed for 10 years and ended up working with rugby players. It wasn't until the very end of my time in Europe that I ever worked with dancers. I worked with some of the Paris Opera Ballet dancers and realized that their bodies were way more messed up than rugby players ever were. And when I came back to the US, because my younger sister was graduating high school, and we kind of did a rock, paper, scissors. If I could get a job and she could get into college in the same state, where would we want to be? And we both said Colorado. I got a job in Vail, and she got into college in Alamosa. I moved back, and I've never left. I fell in love with mountain biking. And that was my first kind of step into becoming an athlete. I was competing single speed mountain biking. I never looked back. I've never had a bike with gears. And in my sister's third year of college, I was pregnant with my daughter. She was a college campus rape. And I, in that moment, realizing that I was about to bring another young woman into the world, thought of my parents and what were the odds that two daughters, 10 years apart, two different states, completely different circumstances, could be sexually assaulted. And when I started Google searching, I found out the odds were really, really bad. And in that moment, left my career as a sports trainer behind and started working as a women's rights activist. And decided that I wanted to find what were the ingredients necessary for gender violence. And I picked the country that had the worst gender violence rates in the world, which was Afghanistan. And for the past decade, I've been working in Afghanistan and women's rights. And the reason being that I wanted to understand and apply back here at home. In the meantime, I fell in love with Afghanistan. And while I was there, I realized that while I saw men and boys on bikes, I never saw women on bikes. And I saw women at this point in time entering into sports, entering into activism, running for parliament. I met a woman who ran for president. Women were becoming judges. There was this progression for women's rights in Afghanistan, and so much progress in sports, but not on bikes. And bikes are these incredible vehicles for social justice and change, because they're not just a sport, they are a vehicle for transportation. They are literally vehicles of change. And so I started mountain biking in Afghanistan and became the first woman, the first person to mountain bike in Afghanistan, and continued to do that over a decade throughout different parts of Afghanistan to experiment and to explore why this was still a taboo. And it linked back to our own taboo in America, in Britain, in France, in Australia, as to why the bike is such a taboo. And it was always intrinsically linked with the women's suffragette movement. 5 years into working in Afghanistan, I met the first group of women to ride bikes. And in that period of time, since then, we now have a women's national cycling team in Afghanistan. We have another team in Bamiyan. We have another provincial team in Balkh province up in the north, and multiple girls' teams riding. And there is this burgeoning right-to-ride movement that has sprung up that is mirroring the right-to-ride movements we saw happen a century ago in our own country. And that's been kind of the journey that has brought me back to really what the first panel was all about, which is how sports is intrinsically linked with human rights.
Well, I think we should clap again because this is such an incredible panel. So I know that I am sitting here just sort of astounded by the accomplishments of these women, and I'm hearing you are too. I have a question for the panelists. I would like you to talk to us a little bit about who was it in your life, in whatever capacity it may be, a mentor, a parent, a friend, a coach, who lent their support to you and helped you reach for your goals. Or if you don't happen to have that person in your own life, if you plan to or are currently that inspiration or mentor for somebody else.
Well, then I'll just pick up where I left off, which is essentially because I wasn't involved in sports, I was involved in dance. I have become that person with the women's cycling movement in Afghanistan, which is by far the greatest honor I could have ever had, because I'm able to work with these young women who've never ridden bikes, who've never thought that this was something accessible to them. It's still considered a taboo. I mean, they are riding bikes in a time and space in which they're literally risking their lives to ride a bike. Rocks are thrown at us when we ride. They risk their family's honor, their own honor in which to ride, and yet they ride. They choose to ride. And to be able to train them, to coach them, to advise them, to help build the federation, to fight with UCI, with corruption, to learn the ins and outs of how to build structure into the men's team and the women's team, and to build a partnership between the Afghan Federation and the rest of the world that looks upon Afghanistan as this little dot on a map that has no function within the cycling world. And yet they look to their Tour de France heroes as something to aspire to. That's this role that has become way more important than anything I could have ever imagined in my career. And it's become this very bizarre full circle from being a sports trainer to a women's rights activist to now melding my human rights and sports background together, and being able to be a mentor in a field I never imagined.
My swimming journey started with a woman seeing me in the pool and struggling to try to swim. And she told me that if I showed up every day at 06, she would help coach me. She didn't have to do that. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know anything about her, and she didn't know anything about me, but she was just willing to help. Turns out she was a very good swimmer herself, as well as a coach at Auburn, and her name is Stephanie Barnes. And she took the time for me that I had never had someone take in that capacity. No one saw me and saw an athlete, and she did. And so now I'm fortunate enough to get to provide that to other people. And now I spend as much as I can mentoring other soldiers or people in transition in the pool, whether they're ill, sick, injured, or because they just need some kind of water therapy. It can be a beautiful, peaceful place, even if their end goal isn't a podium. And so I've been very, very fortunate in that I had someone see me and help me and open up a whole new path for me. And now I get to try and provide that for other people.
This question makes me sad, and I told you earlier, it makes me really sad because growing up, I never had someone to first of all, to emulate that looked like me or had the same kind of struggles I did. It was really unheard of for a woman to be so public in sports. I mean, hooray for us. We started driving a few months ago, so that's a good start. But it was not acceptable for a woman to do that, and sometimes I had to train. You have to understand, I live in one of the hottest places in the world, and I had to train in La Sportiva triple boots. And it's hot out. It's really, I don't know in Fahrenheit, but it's really, really hot out. So I'm wearing these triple boots and I'm walking in the mall because it's the only place where you can walk with wearing my abaya. You have to understand that people would look and say, who is that child? Take her home, she's crazy. So not only that I didn't have a mentor, I didn't have support outside the very small circle, which was very, very difficult for me because it's so crucial to have someone that can help take your hand and tell you that you're special. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're just a little bit different. So I never had that. And the contrary, I had the opposite of that. So I promised myself that if I have an opportunity, that I will be as much as a mentor, which kind of makes a lot of families not happy back home. They say there's a funny saying now. When some girl wants to do something very, very dramatic, they say, "Who do you think you are, Raham Harrag?" Which can be a compliment, in a way. Which can be a compliment in a way, and because I've become synonymous with crazy things, because I continued to do a lot of things that are crazy. One of them is bicycle across Iowa when I didn't know how to ride a bicycle, thanks to Mara, and I became a spokesperson. And because of that, and because of social media, and removing the middle person, which was usually the person that said, no, you can't speak to her because she's a bad example. Social media removed that. I get daily messages from girls from all over the world in general, and specifically the Arab world, asking me about how to hike, how to climb, how to ask their parent to go on a girls' trip, stuff like that. So unfortunately, even though I didn't have someone out there, I hope that one day I can at least have a small hand in maybe the next or the first, because Saudi Arabia has never won an Olympic gold, male or female. That says something about the males, by the way, since they have all the opportunity. I hope sorry, was that so bad? But it's true, like they have all the opportunity, and yet we've never won that. And that's a symbol of the country's ability to raise talent, right? But we don't have an infrastructure about sports in that matter. So I really hope one day I have a small hand in a girl winning the first Saudi gold. It doesn't matter, in what sport, I just want it to be a woman. Wouldn't that be amazing that the first one would be by a female? And if I have a small hand in that, then I'd be happy.
I will never forget when I became the first female to coach in the NFL. The question I always got, well, the comment I always got from people is like, oh my gosh, you're living the dream, you're coaching at the NFL. And I'd have to look at them and I'm like, no, actually, this is not a dream that I was ever permitted to have. But the beauty of this is that now other little girls can grow up with this dream. That's the power of a first to me. I didn't have anybody that I could look to for a roadmap of how to be a great female football coach, because there wasn't anybody. So I had very powerful men who thankfully saw my football acumen, not my gender, and just kind of oftentimes drop-kicked me into success. There's a stat that women will often self-select out of things because they feel like they have to be overqualified to take an opportunity. They will literally look at this list and they'll be like, yep, got it, nailed it, got it, everything, done that 8 times, climbed that mountain, rode that bike, saved that guy from a war. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I don't have the last one, I don't have a penis. Sorry, I don't and I can't do it, okay? Sorry, I am not equipped with the equipment, okay? They will look at it and they will think that. Now, men will oftentimes look at a situation very differently. They'll read a job description. I had a reality show. I could be president. So my point in saying that is that we have to look to put women into situations where they can step into success even if they may not feel like they're ready. Because you guys who are in the rooms, you have the ability to be that person. And I had those men be those people for me. My first coaching job that I got offered was after I played on the Texas Revolution. Here I was, the first woman to play running back in men's professional football, and I developed great relationships that caught the attention of a new head coach when he came in the following season. And he looked at me after meeting me and grilling me on football. He called me the next day and he said, "You have to coach my football team." And I said, "No." He said, "What do you mean, no?" I said, no, girls don't coach football. I don't want to coach football. And like, I wasn't even that kind of player. Like, I was the one who would just go kill the quarterback. Like, I'm not the captain. I'm not getting everybody in line. Like, I was the wild card. No. And he looked at me and he said, "Not a lot of guys are going to give this opportunity. You're taking this job." And I said, "No." And I hung up on him. He called me back the next day and he told me about myself. He said, "Do you remember how I told you not a lot of guys were going to give you this opportunity and you were taking this job?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good, I took it for you." You're coaching for me. And by the way, you can't quit. Otherwise, the entire narrative surrounding women coaching in men's professional football will be, "We had a girl once and she quit." Boy, oh boy, did he have my number. Because I might have quit on myself. I might not have believed that I was capable or I was meant to do it, and I might not have stepped up into that challenge. But I would have never quit on every one of the women who I had been in the trenches with, fighting with for so long. And I am so thankful that he did that for me and that men have done that for me all along the way. It's not that women wouldn't have, but they couldn't because they weren't there. And so now my obligation is to remain, and the promise I made being the first is great, but the goal is to be the first and not the last.
Because we have a few minutes before we have to go, I was wondering if the panelists would offer just one, because we only have about 5 minutes or so, just one nugget of advice for, I do see some girls, young girls out here in the audience. So what would you tell those girls if you just had to, in a sentence or two, give them a piece of advice?
Find the thing that you love in this world. And realize that that thing is not a girl thing or a boy thing. It's something that makes you love to do it. Because when you love what you do, you will never work a day in your life. And you'll be great at it because you'll put that time in. And just realize that, I coach girls in football all the time now. Because I found my confidence through football. And what they used to say was the final frontier for women in sports. I found this invincibility because I just believed if we could do this, if we could win in this game, then we could do anything. And so when I coach girls now, I do it to show them it's not you can't do it because you're a girl, or that you throw like a girl or throw like a boy. You either throw the right way or you don't. And with great coaching and the access to resources, you can do anything and be fearless and feisty and love what you do. Because if you do that, you'll never be defeated.
Never ever ask for equality. Don't wait for someone to give you an equality. Simply walk into a room and equal. Never wait for it. Demand it, it's your right. Every single one of you deserves it. If you wait for it, we'll wait a very long time. Thank you.
I would say regardless of if you're a female or a male, any kid or anyone going through a hard situation in life, every single obstacle is an opportunity. You are being tested so that you can be better. And if people do treat you differently because you're a female or because you're a male, it's your opportunity to prove to them and to yourself that they're wrong. So don't treat them as obstacles, because every single one will lead to opportunity.
So I was just having this conversation very recently with a few friends of mine, and I think that one of the things I would like my own daughter to really remember is don't let anybody put you in a box and define you by one thing. I'm very lucky to have had multiple careers, and I'm an author, I'm a film producer, I'm an activist, I'm an artist, and I'm many, many other things. And it's because I didn't let anybody tell me what I was. I don't have to be one thing. And I think I'd be very boring if I was. I think I would be bored by myself if I was. I want to keep exploring, I want to keep evolving, and I want to tell stories, I want to share the stories of other women, I want to empower myself and elevate other women around me. And by doing that means that I want to keep exploring all the different facets of myself. And that means not just being one thing. So you don't have to define yourself by what you choose to be now. Allow yourself to continue to change.
Well, I think we could spend the whole night listening to these amazing women's stories. I just want to thank you all for taking the time and traveling long distances in some cases to be here tonight. And I will ask the audience to help me thank everyone on the panel.